Welcome to Storytime with Moog. I am Moog, and today we are reading Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, starting with Part 4, Book Chapter 1. So, today we are reading Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, starting with Part 4, Chapter 1. Beautiful. Where did we leave off? Last time we had a lot of Levin. Just a lot of Levin. And basically, he is trying to kind of do soul searching without actually doing the soul searching. And so, like, what I mean by that is he's trying to fix everything around him without actually, like, reflecting on his own feelings and his own actions and growing from that. Exactly. The air was thick with Levin. And, like, he's fine. He's fine. I am excited to see. I don't know if excited is that's a strong word. I am ready for him to grow as a character. To like complete his arc or to like just grow in his arc. Something because we dwelt a lot on his sorry spirally self last time. Something that we did, it was a downer that we ended on. The very last thing was Levin's brother came to visit, and his brother is just skin and bones. Like he is not doing well. He is very sick. And his brother is like, "Oh, I'm actually getting better," but like he is not. And he's come there because there is some money discrepancy from the land that they inherited. So they're talking about that. His brother is like pointing questions at Levin about like why he's doing certain things and trying to be like, okay, well, you know that you're just doing this, like that sort of thing. And his brother leaves, and I don't remember exactly the last thing that they say to each other, but they both walk away from that knowing that this might be the last time that they ever see each other. So very heavy. And then a couple days after that, Levin gets on a train to go travel to, find firsthand different ways that people are managing their land. And he is on the train and sees somebody that he knows, like a cousin or something like that. And the cousin is just having a great time, and Levin is like doom and gloom and just thinking, like, man, life is not amazing. But the only thing for Levin right now is to just hold on so tight to his work and to like his his purpose being just work. So that's where we ended last time, methinks. And yeah, it was mostly just Levin. It was mostly Levin. Hmm. All right, let's do it. Part 4, Chapter 1. Let's go. The Karenins, husband and wife, continued living in the same house, met every day, but were complete strangers to one another. Alexei Alexandrovitch made it a rule to see his wife every day, so that the servants might have no grounds for suppositions, but avoided dining at home. Vronsky was never at Alexei Alexandrovitch's house, but Anna saw him away from home, and her husband was aware of it. The position was one of misery for all three, and not one of them would have been equal to enduring this position for a single day, if it had not been for the expectation that it would change, that it was merely a temporary painful ordeal which would pass over. Alexei Alexandrovitch hoped that this passion would pass, as everything does pass, that everyone would forget about it, and his name would remain unsullied. Anna, on whom the position depended and for whom it was more miserable than for anyone, endured it because she not merely hoped, but firmly believed that it would all very soon be settled and come right. She had not the least idea what would settle the position, but she firmly believed that something would very soon turn up now. Vronsky, against his own will or wishes, followed her lead. Hoped, too, that something, apart from his own action, would be sure to solve all difficulties. In the middle of winter, Vronsky spent a very tiresome week. A foreign prince who had come on a visit to Petersburg was put under his charge, and he had to show him the sights worth seeing. Vronsky was of distinguished appearance. He possessed, moreover, the art of behaving with respectful dignity, and was used to having to do with such grand personages. That was how he came to be put in charge of the prince. But he felt his duties very irksome. The prince was anxious to miss nothing of which he would be asked at home. Had he not seen that in Russia? And on his own account he was anxious to enjoy the utmost all Russian forms of amusement. Vronsky was obliged to be his guide in satisfying both these inclinations. The mornings they spent driving to look at places of interest. The evenings they passed enjoying the national entertainments. The prince rejoiced in health exceptional even among princes. By gymnastics and careful attention to his health, he had brought himself to such a point that in spite of his excess in pleasure, he looked as fresh as a big, glossy, green Dutch cucumber. The prince had traveled a great deal, and considered one of the chief advantages of modern facilities of communication was the accessibility of the pleasures of all nations. He had been in Spain, and there had indulged in serenades, and had made friends with a Spanish girl who played the mandolin. In Switzerland he had killed chamois. In England he had galloped in a red coat over hedges and killed 200 pheasants for a bet. In Turkey he had got into a harem. In India he had hunted on an elephant. And now in Russia he wished to taste all the specially Russian forms of pleasure. Vronsky, who was, as it were, chief master of the ceremonies to him, was at great pains to arrange all the Russian amusements suggested by various persons to the prince. They had race horses, and Russian pancakes, and bear hunts, and 3 horse sledges, and drinking feasts, with a Russian accompaniment of broken crockery. And the prince, with surprising ease, fell in with the Russian spirit, smashed trays full of crockery, sat with traveling musicians on each knee, and seemed to be asking, "What more? And does the whole Russian spirit consist in just this?" In reality, of all the Russian entertainments, the prince liked best French actresses and ballet dancers, and white seal champagne. Vronsky was used to princes, but, either because he had himself changed of late, or that he was in too close proximity to the prince, that week seemed fearfully wearisome to him. The whole of that week he experienced a sensation such as a man might have set in charge of a dangerous madman, afraid of the madman, and at the same time, from being with him, fearing for his own reason. Vronsky was continually conscious of the necessity of never for a second relaxing the tone of stern official respectfulness, that he might not himself be insulted. The prince's manner of treating the very people who, to Vronsky's surprise, were ready to descend to any depths to provide him with Russian amusements was contemptuous. His criticisms of Russian women whom he wished to study more than once made Vronsky crimson with indignation. The chief reason why the prince was so particularly disagreeable to Vronsky was that he could not help seeing himself in him. And what he saw in this mirror did not gratify his self-esteem. He was a very stupid, and very self-satisfied, and very healthy, and very well-washed man, and nothing else. He was a gentleman, that was true, and Vronsky could not deny it. He was equable and not cringing with his superiors, was free and ingratiating in his behavior with his equals, and was contemptuously indulgent with his inferiors. Vronsky was himself the same, and regarded it as a great merit to be so. But for this prince he was an inferior, and his contemptuous and indulgent attitude to him revolted him. Brainless beef, can I be like that? He thought. Be that as it might, when, on the 7th day, he parted from the prince, who was starting for Moscow, and received his thanks. He was happy to be rid of his uncomfortable position and the unpleasant reflection of himself. He said goodbye to him at the station on their return from a bear hunt, at which they had a display of Russian prowess kept up all night. End of chapter 1. Okay, so kind of like an introductory. Like, okay, you have finished part 3. Good job. We're not gonna just dive in immediately to really, really heavy things. No. Let us just simply remind you of a couple of things. So Anna and Alexei are living together, and they are making public appearances, and Alexei is making sure that he sees his wife and making it a point that they are together however many times weekly. The allotted amount which society deems okay. And that has not stopped Anna from seeing Vronsky, and Alexei is aware of this. Vronsky is keeping busy by having to be a host to a prince, and so he is doing like a lot of extra things, and these extra things are very much like, let's go out really late, and let's, drink a lot, and hang out with all of these traveling performer women, and do all of these things. And he has the same attitude that Vronsky has, like how he treats his inferiors, his equals, and those above him. And Vronsky doesn't really like it. Like, because he has the same, like, disposition of how to treat people, he takes that as a pride in himself. However, he is seen as an inferior to the prince. So the prince is treating him as an inferior, and that he doesn't like that. So yeah, exactly. It's a dark mirror, and he's like, you are me, we are one. This is what you're like. That last rambly bit may or may not have made sense, but you know what I'm saying. Just a a nice little tip in the toe in. Chapter 2. When he got home, Vronsky found there a note from Anna. She wrote, "I am ill and unhappy. I cannot come out, but I cannot go on longer without seeing you. Come in this evening. Alexei Alexandrovitch goes to the council at 7 and will be there till 10. Thinking for an instant of the strangeness of her bidding him come straight to her, in spite of her husband's insisting on her not receiving him, he decided to go. Vronsky had that winter got his promotion and was now a colonel, had left the regimental quarters and was living alone. After having some lunch, he lay down on the sofa immediately, and in 5 minutes memories of the hideous scenes he had witnessed during the last few days were confused together and joined on to a mental image of Anna and of the peasant who had played an important part in the bear hunt, and Vronsky fell asleep. He waked up in the dark, trembling with horror, and made haste to light a candle. What was it? What? What was the dreadful thing I dreamed? Yes, yes, I think a little dirty man with a disheveled beard was stooping down, doing something, and all of a sudden he began saying some strange words in French. Yes, there was nothing else in the dream, he said to himself. But why was it so awful? He vividly recalled the peasant again, and those incomprehensible French words the peasant had uttered, and a chill of horror ran down his spine. What nonsense, thought Vronsky, and glanced at his watch. It was 8:30 already. He rang up his servant, dressed in haste, and went out onto the steps, completely forgetting the dream and only worried at being late. As he drove up to the Karenin's entrance, he looked at his watch and saw it was 10 minutes to 9. A high, narrow carriage with a pair of greys was standing at the entrance. He recognized Anna's carriage. She is coming to me, thought Vronsky. And better she should. I don't like going into the house. But no matter. I can't hide myself, he thought. And with that manner peculiar to him from childhood, as of a man who has nothing to be ashamed of, Vronsky got out of his sledge and went to the door. The door opened, and the hall porter, with a rug on his arm, called the carriage. Vronsky, though he did not usually notice details, noticed at this moment the amazed expression with which the porter glanced at him. In the very doorway, Vronsky almost ran up against Alexey Alexandrovitch. The gas jet threw its full light on the bloodless, sunken face under the black hat and on the white cravat, brilliant against the beaver of the coat. Karenin's fixed, dull eyes were fastened upon Vronsky's face. Vronsky bowed, and Alexey Alexandrovitch, chewing his lips, lifted his hand to his hat and went on. Vronsky saw him, without looking round, get into the carriage, pick up the rug and the opera glass at the window, and disappear. Vronsky went into the hall. His brows were scowling, and his eyes gleamed with a proud and angry light in them. What a position, he thought. If he would fight, would stand up for his honor, I would act, would express my feelings. But this weakness, or baseness, he puts me in the position of playing false, which I never meant and never mean to do. Vronsky's ideas had changed since the day of his conversation with Anna in the Verde garden. Unconsciously yielding to the weakness of Anna, who had surrendered herself up to him utterly, and simply looked to him to decide her fate, ready to submit to anything, he had long ceased to think that their tie might end as he had thought then. His ambitious plans had retreated into the background again, and feeling that he had got out of that circle of activity in which everything was definite, he had given himself entirely to his passion, and that passion was binding him more and more closely to her. He was still in the hall when he caught the sound of her retreating footsteps. He knew she had been expecting him, had listened for him, and was now going back to the drawing room. "No," she cried on seeing him, and at the first sound of her voice the tears came into her eyes. "No. If things are to go on like this, the end will come much, much too soon." "What is it, dear one?" "What? I've been waiting in agony for an hour. 2 hours. No, I won't. I can't quarrel with you. Of course you couldn't come. No, I won't." She laid her 2 hands on his shoulders and looked a long while at him with a profound, passionate, and at the same time searching look. She was studying his face to make up for the time she had not seen him. She was, every time she saw him, making the picture of him in her imagination incomparably superior, impossible in reality, fit with him as he really was. End of chapter 2. Okay. Okay. So Anna is sickly and she cannot leave the house, but she misses Vronsky very much. So she sends out a letter to him telling him just that and is like, hubby who is going to be gone from this time to this time. Come over. And so Vronsky is like, all right, cool. Well, he takes a little nap and wakes up kind of late, has a weird dream, has a really weird dream, and he like ponders it for a minute, realizes the time, and then just instantly forgets the dream, goes there, sees Anna's carriage, and is like, oh, okay, Anna was gonna come to me, which is so much better because I feel uncomfortable walking into this house. Well, it wasn't the carriage for Anna, it was for Alexei, and they pass each other, and Alexei just, you know, very proper, just nods, gets into the carriage, and goes away. Instead of like fighting or saying anything, the only acknowledgement that Vronsky is here is just a little nod. And so Vronsky goes inside, and Anna is there and is like, oh, like, I've missed you so much. I've waited for you for hours. And you know what? No, I don't want to fight with you. This is, you obviously just couldn't come earlier. And that is where it's ended. There is like a moment, like a slight little line where every time she sees Vronsky, she's imagining him a specific way, which is impossible in the actual reality. And I think that that is interesting, and I feel like that is a rumbling of something to come later, which is exciting. I'm excited. Chapter 3. You met him? She asked, when they had sat down at the table in the lamplight. You're punished, you see, for being late. Yes, but how was it? Wasn't he to be at the council? He had been and come back, and was going out somewhere again. But that's no matter. Don't talk about it. Where have you been? With the prince still? She knew every detail of his existence. He was going to say that he had been up all night and had dropped asleep, but looking at her thrilled and rapturous face, he was ashamed. And he said he had had to go to report to the prince's departure. But it's over now? He is gone? Thank God it's over. You wouldn't believe how insufferable it's been for me. Why so? Isn't it the life all of you, all young men, always lead? She said, knitting her brows and taking up the crochet work that was lying on the table. She began drawing the hook out of it without looking at Vronsky. I gave up. I gave that life up long ago, said he, wondering at the change in her face and trying to divine its meanings. And I confess, he said with a smile, showing his thick, white teeth, this week I've been, as it were, looking at myself in a glass, seeing that life, and I didn't like it. She held the work in her hands, but did not crochet, and looked at him with strange, shining, and hostile eyes. This morning Liza came to see me. They're not afraid to call on me, in spite of the Countess Lydia Ivanovna, she put in. And she told me about your Athenian evening. How loathsome. I was just going to say, she interrupted him. It was that Therese you used to know? I was just saying how disgusting you are, you men. How is it you can't understand that a woman can never forget that? She said, getting more and more angry. And so letting him see the cause of her irritation, especially a woman who cannot know your life. What can I do? What have I ever known? She said. What you tell me, and how do I know whether you tell me the truth? Anna, you hurt me. Don't you trust me? Haven't I told you that I haven't a thought I wouldn't lay bare to you? Yes, yes, said Anna, evidently trying to suppress her jealous thoughts. But if only you knew how wretched I am. I believe you. I believe you. What were you saying? But he could not at once recall what he had been going to say. These fits of jealousy, which of late had been more and more frequent with her, horrified him, and however much he tried to disguise the fact, made him feel cold to her. Although he knew the cause of her jealousy was her love for him, how often he had told himself that her love was happiness, and now she loved him as a woman who can love when love has outweighed for her all the good things of life. And he was much further from happiness than when he had followed her from Moscow. Then he had thought himself unhappy, but happiness was before him. Now he felt that the best happiness was already left behind. She was utterly unlike what she had been when he first saw her. Both morally and physically she had changed for the worse. She had broadened out all over, and in her face at the time when she was speaking of the actress, there was an evil expression of hatred that contorted it. He looked at her as a man looks at a faded flower he has gathered, with difficulty recognizing in it the beauty for which he picked and ruined it. And in spite of this, he felt that then, when his love was stronger, he could, if he had greatly wished it, have torn that love out of his heart. But now, when, as at that moment, it seemed to him he felt no love for her, he knew that what bound him to her could not be broken. Well, what was it you were going to say about the prince? I have driven away the fiend, she added. The fiend was the name they had given her jealousy. What did you begin to tell me about the prince? Why did you find it so tiresome? Oh, it was intolerable, he said, trying to pick up the thread of his interrupted thought. He does not improve on closer acquaintance. If you want him defined, here he is. A prime, well-fed beast such as takes medals at the cattle shows, and nothing more, he said, with a tone of vexation that interested her. No. How so? She replied. He's seen a great deal, anyway. He's cultured. It's an utterly different culture. Their culture. He's cultivated, one sees, simply to be able to despise culture, as they despise everything but animal pleasures. But don't you all care for these animal pleasures? She said, and again he noticed a dark look in her eyes that avoided him. How is it you're defending him? He said, smiling. I'm not defending him. It's nothing to me, but I imagine if you had not cared for those pleasures yourself, you might have got out of them. But if it affords you satisfaction to gaze at Thérèse in the attire of Eve, again, the devil again, Vronsky said, taking the hand she had laid on the table and kissing it. Yes, but I can't help it. You don't know what I have suffered waiting for you. I believe I'm not jealous. I'm not jealous. I believe you when you're here, but when you're away, somewhere leading your life, so incomprehensible to me. She turned away from him, pulled the hook at last out of the crochet work, and rapidly, with the help of her forefinger, began working loop after loop of the wool that was dazzling white in the lamplight, while the slender wrist moved swiftly, nervously in the embroidered cuff. How was it then? Where did you meet, Alexey Alexandrovitch? Her voice sounded in an unnatural and jarring tone. We ran up against each other in the doorway. And he bowed to you, like this? She drew a long face, and half closing her eyes, quickly transformed her expression, folded her hands, and Vronsky suddenly saw in her beautiful face the very expression with which Alexei Alexandrovitch had bowed to him. He smiled, while she laughed happily, with that sweet, deep laugh, which was one of her greatest charms. "I don't understand him in the least," said Vronsky. "If after your avowal to him at your country house he had broken with you, if he had called me out, but this I can't understand. How can he put up with such a position? He feels it, that's evident." "He?" she said sneeringly. "He's perfectly satisfied." "What are we all miserable for, when everything might be so happy?" Not he. Don't I know him? The falsity in which he's utterly steeped. Could one, with any feeling, live as he is living with me? He understands nothing and feels nothing. Could a man of any feeling live in the same house with his unfaithful wife? Could he talk to her, call her my dear? And again, she could not help mimicking him. Anna, mon cher Anna, dear. He's not a man, not a human being. He's a doll. No one knows him, but I know him. Oh, if I'd been in his place, I'd long ago have killed, have torn to pieces a wife like me. I wouldn't have said, Anna, mon cher. He's not a man. He's an official machine. He doesn't understand that I'm your wife, that he's outside and he's superfluous. Let's talk of him. "You're unfair, very unfair, dearest," said Vronsky, trying to soothe her. "But never mind, let's talk of him. Tell me what you've been doing. What is the matter? What has been wrong with you, and what did the doctor say?" She looked at him with mocking amusement. Evidently she had hit on other absurd and grotesque aspects in her husband, and was awaiting the moment to give expression to them. But he went on. "I can imagine that it's not illness, but your condition. When will it be?" The ironical light died away in her eyes, but a different smile, a consciousness of something, he did not know what, and of quite melancholy, came over her face. "Soon, soon. You say that our position is miserable, that we must put an end to it. If you knew how terrible it is to me, what I would give to be able to love you freely and boldly. I should not torture myself and torture you with my jealousy, and it will come soon, but not as we expect." And at the thought of how it would come, she seemed so pitiable to herself that tears came into her eyes, and she could not go on. She laid her hand on his sleeve, dazzling and white with its rings in the lamplight. "It won't come as we suppose. I didn't mean to say this to you, but you've made me. Soon, soon all will be over, and we shall all be at peace and suffer no more." "I don't understand," he said, understanding her. "You asked when. Soon. And I shan't live through it. Don't interrupt me." And she made haste to speak. "I know it. I know for certain I shall die, and I'm very glad I shall die, and release myself, and you." Tears dropped from her eyes. He bent down over her hand and began kissing it, trying to hide his emotion, which, he knew, had no sort of grounds, though he could not control it. "Yes, it's better so," she said, tightly gripping his hand. "That's the only way left us." He had recovered himself, and lifted his head. "How absurd! What absurd nonsense you are talking! No, it's the truth." What's the truth?" "That I shall die. I have had a dream." A dream," repeated Vronsky, and instantly he recalled the peasant. Of his dream. "Yes, a dream," she said. "It's a long while since I dreamed it. I dreamed that I ran into my bedroom, that I had to get something there, to find out something. You know how it is in dreams, she said, her eyes wide with horror. And in the bedroom, in the corner, stood something. What nonsense! How can you believe? But she would not let him interrupt her. What she was saying was too important to her. And the something turned around, and I saw it was a peasant with a disheveled beard, little and dreadful looking. I wanted to run away, but he bent down over a sack and was fumbling there with his hands. She showed how he had moved his hands. There was a terror in her face, and Vronsky, remembering his dream, felt the same terror filling his soul. He was fumbling, and kept talking quickly in French, you know. And in my horror, I tried to wake up, and woke up, but woke up in the dream, and I began asking myself what it meant. And Corny said to me, "In childbirth, you'll die, ma'am. You'll die." And I woke up. What nonsense, said Vronsky. But he felt himself that there was no conviction in his voice. But let's talk of it. Ring the bell, I'll have tea, and stay a little now. It's not long, I shall... But all at once, she stopped. The expression of her face instantaneously changed. Horror and excitement were replaced by a look of soft, solemn, blissful attention. He could not comprehend the meaning of the change. She was listening to the stirring of the new life within her. End of chapter 3. Okay, chapter 3. That last little bit I feel like could have been like a switch. Like, oh, we're in a fantasy book now. This is just Dune. All right, chapter 3. We have Vronsky and Anna hashing it out, and Anna's very jealous that Vronsky has been out and about with the prince doing who knows what, just living life to the fullest. And Anna is not 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 having it. She's not happy about it. And Vronsky is trying to like calm her down and reassure her that there's nothing to worry about. And while he's doing that, he's seeing her in a different light. There's the imagery of like looking at her as a picked flower that has now withered and is no longer as beautiful as when it was not picked, when it was still growing in the ground. And Anna is like, don't worry about everything. Everything will change very soon. And Vronsky's like, okay, but like when? What are you talking about? Like, are you ill because of like your condition? And Anna is like, it's and she talks about a dream that she had, which is the same dream that Vronsky just had about this peasant who is fumbling around. But Anna like had the time to like realize what was happening, and also in her dream she like woke up but was still in the dream and was told that she would die. So now she's like, very soon it will happen. I will die, and I will free myself, and I will free you from all of this. And Vronsky is trying so hard to be like, you're speaking nonsense, but he's sounding more and more less convinced, more and more less convinced, more and more less convinced as he is seeing the gravity of the dream and also the same, like, shookethness that he's having from having that same dream and that vision, because it just seemed different from other dreams that he had had. Chapter 4. Alexei Alexandrovich, after meeting Vronsky on his own steps, drove, as he had intended, to the Italian opera. He sat through 2 acts there, and saw everyone he had wanted to see. On returning home, he carefully scrutinized the hat stand, and noticing that there was not a military overcoat there, he went, as usual, to his own room. But contrary to his usual habit, he did not go to bed. He walked up and down his study till 3 o'clock in the morning. The feeling of furious anger with his wife would not obscure the proprieties, and keep to the one stipulation he had laid on her, not to receive her lover in her own home, gave him no peace. She had not complied with his request, and he was bound to punish her and carry out his threat, obtain a divorce, and take away his son. He knew all the difficulties connected with this course, but he had said he would do it, and now he must carry out his threat. Countess Lydia Ivanovna had hinted that this was the best way of his position, and of late the obtaining of divorces had been brought to such perfection that Alexey Alexandrovitch saw a possibility of overcoming the formal difficulties. Misfortunes never came singly, and the affairs of the reorganization of the native tribes and of the irrigation of the lands of the Zaraisky province had brought such official worries upon Alexey Alexandrovitch that he had been of late in a continual condition of extreme irritability. He did not sleep the whole night, and his fury, growing in a sort of vast arithmetical progression, reached its highest limits in the morning. He dressed in haste, and as though carrying his cup full of wrath, and fearing to spill any over, fearing to lose with his wrath the energy necessary for the interview with his wife, he went into her room directly he heard she was up. Anna, who had thought she knew her husband so well, was amazed at his appearance when he went into her. His brow was lowering, and his eyes stared darkly before him, avoiding her eyes. His mouth was tightly and contemptuously shut. In his walk, in his gestures, in the sound of his voice, there was a determination and firmness such as his wife had never seen in him. He went into her room, and without greeting her, walked straight up to her writing table, and taking her keys, opened a drawer. "What do you want?" she cried. "Your lover's letters," he said. "They're not here," she said, shutting the drawer. But from that action he saw he had guessed right, and roughly pushed away her hand. He quickly snatched a portfolio in which he knew she used to put her most important papers. She tried to pull the portfolio away, but he pushed her back. "Sit down. I have to speak to you," he said, putting the portfolio under his arm and squeezing it so tightly with his elbow that his shoulder stood up. Amazed and intimidated, she gazed at him in silence. "I told you that I would not allow you to receive your lover in this house. I had to see him to—" She stopped, not finding a reason. "I do not enter into the details of why a woman wants to see her lover. Well, I only meant," she said, flushing hotly. This coarseness of his angered her, and gave her courage. "Surely you must feel how easy it is for you to insult me," she said. "An honest man and an honest woman may be insulted, but to tell a thief he's a thief is simply la constatation d'un fait. This cruelty is something new I did not know in you. You call it cruelty for a husband to give his wife liberty, giving her the honorable protection of his name, simply on the condition of observing the proprieties. Is that cruelty?" "It's worse than cruel. It's base, if you want to know," Anna cried, in a rush of hatred, and getting up, she was going away. "No!" he shrieked in his shrill voice, which pitched a note higher than usual even, and his big hands clutched her by her arm so violently that red marks were left from her bracelet he was squeezing. He forcibly sat her down in her place. "Base, if you care to use that word. What is base is to forsake husband and child for a lover, while you eat your husband's bread." She bowed her head. She did not say what she had said the evening before to her lover, that he was her husband, and her husband was superfluous. She did not even think that. She felt all the justice of his words, and only said softly, "You cannot describe my position as worse than I feel it to myself, to be myself. But what are you saying all this for?" "What am I saying it for? What for?" he went on as angrily. "What you may know that since you have not carried out my wishes in regard to observing outward decorum, I will take measures to put an end to this state of things. Soon, very soon it will end, anyway," she said. And again, at the thought of death near at hand and now desired, tears came into her eyes. "It will end sooner than you and your lover have planned. If you must have the satisfaction of animal passion, Alexey Alexandrovitch, I won't say it's not generous, but it's not like a gentleman to strike anyone who's down. Yes, you only think of yourself, but the sufferings of a man who was your husband have no interest for you. You don't care that his whole life is ruined, that he is thuff. Alexey Alexandrovitch was speaking so quickly that he stammered, and was utterly unable to articulate the word suffering. In the end, he pronounced it suffering. She wanted to laugh, and was immediately ashamed that anything could amuse her at such a moment. And for the first time, for an instant, she felt for him, put herself in his place, and was sorry for him. But what could she say or do? Her head sank, and she sat in silence. He, too, was silent for some time, and then began speaking in a frigid, less shrill voice, emphasizing random words that had no special significance. "I came to tell you," he said. She glanced at him. No. It was my fancy, she thought, recalling the expression of his face when he stumbled over the word suffering. No. Can a man with those dull eyes, with that self-satisfied complacency, feel anything? "I cannot change anything," she whispered. "I have come to tell you that I am going tomorrow to Moscow, and shall not return again to this house, and you will receive notice of what I decide through the lawyer into whose hands I shall entrust the task of getting a divorce. My son is going to my sister's," said Alexey Alexandrovitch, with an effort recalling what he had meant to say about his son. "You take Siroisa to hurt me," she said, looking at him from under her brows. "You do not love him. Leave me, Siroisa." "Yes, I have lost even my affection for my son because he is associated with the repulsion I feel for you, but still I shall take him. Goodbye." And he was going away. But now she detained him. And he was going away. But now she detained him. "Alexey Alexandrovitch, leave me, Siroisa," she whispered once more. "I have nothing else to say. Leave Siroisa till I shall soon be confined. Leave him." Alexey Alexandrovitch flew into a rage, and snatching his hand from her, he went out the room without a word. End of chapter 4. Okay. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay, so Alexei left. We saw him leave, and him and Vronsky did a little ships passing in the night, but they did see each other. And Alexei did not react. The only indication he gave was like a nod, and then went about his way. He actually did go to the Italian opera, which was his intention, and when he comes home, he studies the coat rack, notices that Vronsky's coat is not there, and so knows that he's not there. And so he goes upstairs, he knows that Anna's awake, and is just enraged because he had like one rule for Anna, which was don't have your lover in our house. Just don't do it. And Vronsky was there. The lover was there. And so he runs upstairs like grabs the key for her drawing desk, opens it up, pulls out where he knows that the love letters are, and Anna's trying to fight him off and she can't, and he is just so angered, and so he takes all of the letters and he shoves her down onto the chair, and he is just so flustered by everything that he's having a hard time even remembering what he was going to say, like why he came up there. And he tells her, like, this was the one thing that I said. You disobeyed me. The bottom line is, you disobeyed me, so now he's leaving and he's not coming back to this house. And the only communication that Anna will have with him is through his lawyer for an actual divorce. And Anna just keeps like she's there, but she's not. And because of the dream that she talked about previously, she knows that she's going to die soon. Like this is her like assumption. Like her end all be all, this is what's going to happen and it is going to be soon. And Alexia is like, I'm going to take my son, and Anna's like, how dare you? Don't take that. Don't take my son away from me. Like you're just doing that to be cruel. And Alexia is like, no. I'm just taking him because he shouldn't be here with you. And anything else that was like said in there? There was a lot of things. Oh, and because Alexei was like so worked up, he was having a hard time articulating his actual words, and instead of saying suffering, he ended up saying suffering. And so Anna like inwardly giggled, and I love that detail. I love it so much because it's not because like she is just like thinks that it's funny. Yeah, okay, it's funny when people, misspeak. I do it literally all the time, and like almost every time I think it's funny. But it's like a tension thing. Like there's already so much tension that's going on, and she's already so uncomfortable by Alexei physically being there in front of her, but then everything else, like her being with child, her having the dream that she's going to die, Vronsky, and like how he's like off colluding, cohorting, he's doing things, he's who knows what he's doing. She doesn't, and she's very jealous about it. And so like all of this, and so like when he says that word wrong, it's like a little that's funny. And I love that detail. I love it so much. I love it so much. People laugh when they're uncomfortable. I mean, people laugh for other reasons, but one reason that is often overlooked is when people are uncomfortable. And I think that's great. That's just great character work. Good job, Tolstoy. Well done. Well done, sir. All right. You crack every single one of my fingers. Disgusting. Things are happening. Remember that chapter where it was just like a gentle introduction into part 4? We've surpassed that gentle introduction. We have surpassed it. We're in the thick of it. Chapter 5. The waiting room of the celebrated Petersburg lawyer was full when Alexey Alexandrovitch entered it. 3 ladies, an old lady, a young lady, and a merchant's wife, and 3 gentlemen. One, a German banker with a ring on his finger, the second, a merchant with a beard, and the third, a wrathful-looking government clerk in official uniform, with a cross on his neck, had obviously been waiting a long while already. 2 clerks were writing at tables with scratching pens. The appurtenances appurtenances the appurtenances of the writing tables, about which Alexey Alexandrovitch was himself very fastidious, were exceptionally good. He could not help observing this. One of the clerks, without getting up, turned wrathfully to Alexey Alexandrovitch, half closing his eyes. "What are you wanting?" He replied that he had to see the lawyer on some business. "He is engaged." the clerk responded. And he pointed with his pen at the persons waiting and went on writing. Can't he spare time to see me? Said Alexey Alexandrovitch. He has no free time. He is always busy. Kindly wait your turn. Then I must trouble you to give him my card, Alexey Alexandrovitch said with dignity, seeing the impossibility of preserving his incognito. The clerk took the card and, obviously not approving of what he read on it, went to the door. Alexey Alexandrovitch was in principle in favor of the publicity of legal proceedings, though for some higher official considerations he disliked the application of the principle in Russia, and disapproved of it, as far as he could disapprove of anything instituted by authority of the emperor. His whole life had been spent in administrative work, and consequently, when he did not approve of anything, his disapproval was softened by the recognition of the inevitability of mistakes and the possibility of reform in every department. In the new public law courts, he disliked the restrictions laid on the lawyers conducting cases. But till then, he had had nothing to do with the law courts, and so had disapproved of their publicity simply in theory. Now his disapprobation was strengthened by the unpleasant impression made on him in the lawyer's waiting room. Coming immediately, said the clerk, and 2 minutes later there did actually appear in the doorway the large figure of an old solicitor who had been consulting the lawyer himself. The lawyer was a little, squat, bald man with a dark reddish beard, light-colored long eyebrows, and an overhanging brow. He was attired as though for a wedding, from his cravat to his double watch chain and varnished boots. His face was clever and manly, but his dress was dandified and in bad taste. Pray, walk in, said the lawyer, addressing Alexey Alexandrovitch, and gloomily ushering Karenina in before him. He closed the door. Won't you sit down? He indicated an armchair at a writing table covered with papers. He sat down himself, and, rubbing his little hands with short fingers, covered his white hairs. He bent his head on one side, and as soon as he was settled in this position, a moth flew over the table. The lawyer, with a swiftness that could never have been expected of him, opened his hands, caught the moth, and resumed his former attitude. Before beginning to speak of my business, said Alexey Alexandrovitch, following the lawyer's movements with wandering eyes, I ought to observe that the business about which I have to speak to you is to be strictly private. The lawyer's overhanging reddish mustaches were parted in a scarcely perceptible smile. I should not be a lawyer if I could not keep the secrets confided to me. But if you would like proof... Alexey Alexandrovitch glanced at his face and saw that the shrewd gray eyes were laughing and seemed to know all about it already. You know my name? Alexey Alexandrovitch resumed. I know you and the good. Again he caught a moth. Work you are doing, like every Russian, said the lawyer, bowing. Alexey Alexandrovitch sighed, plucking up his courage. But having once made up his mind, he went on in his shrill voice, without timidity or hesitation, accentuating here and there a word. I have the misfortune, Alexey Alexandrovitch began, to have been deceived in my married life, and I desire to break off all relations with my wife by legal means. That is, to be divorced. But to do this so that my son may not remain with his mother. The lawyer's gray eyes tried not to laugh, but they were dancing with irrepressible glee, and Alexey Alexandrovitch saw that it was not simply the delight of a man who has just got a profitable job. There was a triumph and joy. There was a gleam like the malignant gleam he saw in his wife's eyes. You desire my assistance in securing a divorce, Yes, precisely so. But I ought to warn you that I may be wasting your time and attention. I have come simply to consult you as a preliminary step. I want a divorce, but the form in which it is possible is of great consequence to me. It is very possible that if that form does not correspond with my requirements, I may give up a legal divorce. Oh, that's always the case, said the lawyer, and that's always for you to decide. He let his eyes rest on Alexey Alexandrovich's feet, feeling that he might offend his client by the sight of his irrepressible amusement. He looked at a moth that flew before his nose, and moved his hands, but did not catch it from regard for Alexey Alexandrovich's position. Though, in their general features, our laws on this subject are known to me, pursued Alexey Alexandrovich, I should be glad to have an idea of the forms in which such things are done in practice. You would be glad, the lawyer, without lifting his eyes, responded, adopting with a certain satisfaction the tone of his client's remarks, for me to lay before you all the methods, all the methods by which you could secure what you desire. And on receiving an assuring nod from Alexey Alexandrovich, he went on, stealing a glance now and then at Alexey Alexandrovich's face, which was growing red in patches. Divorce by our laws, he said, with a slight shade of disapprobation at our laws, is possible, as you are aware, in the following cases. Wait a little, he called to a clerk who put his head in at the door, but he got up at all the same, said a few words to him, and sat down again. In the following cases: physical defect in the married parties, desertion without communication for 5 years, he said, crooking a short finger covered with hair. Adultery, this word he pronounced with obvious satisfaction. Subdivided as follows, he continued to crook his fat fingers, though the 3 cases with their subdivisions could obviously not be classified together. Physical defect of the husband or of the wife, adultery of the husband or of the wife. And as by now all his fingers were used up, he uncrooked all his fingers and went on. This is the theoretical view, but I imagine you have done me the honor to apply to me in order to learn its application in practice. And therefore, guided by precedents, I must inform you that in practice cases of divorce may all be reduced to the following. There's no physical defect, I may assume, nor desertion. Alexey Alexandrovich bowed his head in assent. May be reduced to the following: adultery of one of the married parties, and the detection in the fact of the guilty party by mutual agreement, and failing such agreement, accidental detection. It must be admitted that the latter case is rarely met with in practice, said the lawyer, and stealing a glance at Alexey Alexandrovich, he paused. As a man selling pistols, after enlarging on the advancing of each weapon, might await his customer's choice. But Alexey Alexandrovich said nothing, and therefore the lawyer went on. The most usual and simple, the sensible course, I consider, is adultery by mutual consent. I should not permit myself to express it so, speaking with a man of no education, he said. But I imagine to you this is comprehensible. Alexey Alexandrovich was, however, so perturbed that he did not immediately comprehend all the good sense of adultery by mutual consent, and his eyes expressed this uncertainty. But the lawyer promptly came to his assistance. People cannot go on living together. Here you have a fact. And if both are agreed about it, the details and formalities become a matter of no importance. And at the same time, this is the simplest and most certain method. Alexey Alexandrovich fully understood now, but he had religious scruples, which hindered the execution of such a plan. This is out of the question in the present case, he said. Only one alternative is possible, undesigned detection, supported by letters which I have. At the mention of letters, the lawyer pursed his lips and gave utterance to a thin, little compassionate and contemptuous sound. Kindly consider, he began. Cases of that kind are, as you are aware, under ecclesiastical jurisdiction. The Reverend Fathers are fond of going into the minutest detail in cases of that kind, he said with a smile which betrayed his sympathy with the Reverend Father's tastes. Letters may, of course, be a partial confirmation, but detection in the fact there must be of the most direct kind, that is, by eye-witness. In fact, if you do me the honor to entrust your confidence to me, you will do well to leave me the choice of the measures to be employed. If one wants the result, one must admit the means. If it is so, Alexey Alexandrovich began, suddenly turning white. But at that moment the lawyer rose and again went to the door to speak to the intruding clerk. Tell her we don't haggle over fees, he said, and returned to Alexey Alexandrovich. On his way back, he caught, unobserved, another moth. Nice state my rep curtains will be in by the summer, he thought, frowning. And so you were saying, he said. I will communicate my decision to you by letter, said Alexey Alexandrovich, getting up, and he clutched at the table. After standing a moment in silence, he said, From your words, I may consequently conclude that a divorce may be obtained. I would ask you to let me know what are your terms. It may be obtained if you give me complete liberty of action, said the lawyer, not answering his question. When can I reckon on receiving information from you? He asked, moving towards the door, his eyes and his varnished boots shining. In a week's time. Your answer as to whether you will undertake to conduct the case and on what terms, you will be so good as to communicate to me. Very good. The lawyer bowed respectfully, let his client out of the door, and, left alone, gave himself up to his sense of amusement. He felt so mirthful that, contrary to his rules, he made a reduction in his terms to the haggling lady, and gave up catching moths, finally deciding that next winter he must have the furniture covered with velvet, like Sigismund's. End of chapter 5. All right. Chapter 5. Oof. True to his word, Alexei goes and visits a lawyer, and he is just looking for options. And the lawyer is very much like looking for information without giving too much information. But before we get to that, Alexei is sitting outside and he notices that there are 6 people waiting to be seen by the lawyer. And he goes up to the clerk. The clerk is like, you have to wait. And then Alexei tries to see him again or like say something again, like try to persuade him. And the clerk is like, you have to wait. And so Alexei didn't really want to do this, but now he's like pulling the card of like, do you know who I am? And like hands his business card to the clerk. The clerk is like, goes to the lawyer. The lawyer almost instantly sends out his current client and invites Alexei in. And that is when we have lots of moths. Lots of moths in this office. The lawyer keeps like snatching out of the air, which, okay. And yeah, Alexei is just looking for options in the concrete rather than the abstract. In the concrete, what a divorce is, what the steps are. Chapter 6. Alexey Alexandrovich had gained a brilliant victory at the sitting of the commission of the 17th of August, but in the sequel this victory cut the ground from under his feet. The new commission for the inquiry into the condition of the native tribes in all its branches had been formed and dispatched to its destiny with an unusual speed and energy inspired by Alexei Alexandrovitch. Within 3 months, a report was presented. The condition of the native tribes was investigated in its political, administrative, economic, ethnographic, material, and religious aspects. To all these questions, there were answers admirably stated, and answers admitting no shade of doubt, since they were not a product of human thought, always liable to error, but were all the product of official activity. The answers were all based on official data furnished by governors and heads of churches, and founded on the reports of district magistrates and ecclesiastical superintendents, founded in their turn on the reports of parochial overseers and parish priests. And so all these answers were unhesitating and certain. All such questions as, for instance, of the cause of failure of crops, of the adherence of certain tribes to their ancient beliefs, etc. Questions which, but for the convenient intervention of the official machine, are not, and cannot, be solved for ages, received full, unhesitating solutions. And this solution was in favor of Alexei Alexandrovitch's contention. But Stremov, who had felt stung to the quick at the last sitting, had, on the reception of the commission's report, resorted to tactics which Alexei Alexandrovitch had not anticipated. Stremov, carrying with him several members, went over to Alexei Alexandrovitch's side, and not contenting himself with warmly defending the measure proposed by Karenin, proposed other more extreme measures in the same direction. These measures, still further exaggerated in opposition to what was Alexei Alexandrovitch's fundamental idea, were passed by the commission, and then the aim of Stremov's tactics became apparent. Carried to an extreme, the measures seemed at once to be so absurd that the highest authorities and public opinion and intellectual ladies and the newspapers all at the same time fell foul of them, expressing their indignation both with the measures and their nominal father, Alexei Alexandrovitch. Stremov drew back, affecting to have blindly followed Karenin, and to be astounded and distressed at what had been done. This meant the defeat of Alexei Alexandrovitch. But in spite of failing health, in spite of his domestic griefs, he did not give in. There was a split in the commission. Some members, with Stremov at their head, justified their mistake on the ground that they had put faith in the commission of revision instituted by Alexei Alexandrovitch, and maintained that the report of the commission was rubbish, and simply so much waste paper. Alexei Alexandrovitch, with a following of those who saw the danger of so revolutionary an attitude to official documents, persisted in upholding the statements obtained by the revising commission. In consequence of this, in the higher spheres and even in society, all was chaos. And although everyone was interested, no one can tell whether the native tribes really were becoming impoverished and ruined, or whether they were in a flourishing condition. The position of Alexei Alexandrovitch, owing to this, and partly owing to the contempt lavished on him by his wife's infidelity, became very precarious. And in this position he took an important resolution. To the astonishment of the commission, he announced that he should ask permission to go himself to investigate the question on the spot. And having obtained permission, Alexei Alexandrovitch prepared to set off to see these remote provinces. Alexei Alexandrovitch's departure made a great sensation. The more so as just before he started, he officially returned the posting fares, allowed him for 12 horses to drive to his destination. I think it very noble, Betsy said about this to the Princess Myakaya. Why take money for posting horses when everyone knows that there are railways everywhere now? But Princess Myakaya did not agree, and the Princess Sverskaya's opinion annoyed her, indeed. "It's all very well for you to talk," said she, "when we have I don't know how many millions, but I am very glad when my husband goes on a revising tour in the summer. It's very good for him and pleasant traveling about, and it's a settled arrangement for me to keep a carriage and coachman on the money." On his way to the remote provinces, Alexey Alexandrovitch stopped for 3 days at Moscow. The day after his arrival, he was driving back from calling on the Governor-General at the crossroads by Gaztoy Place, where there are always crowds of carriages and sledges. Alexey Alexandrovitch suddenly heard his name called out in such a loud and cheerful voice that he could not help looking around. At the corner of the pavement, in a short, stylish overcoat and a low-crowned, fashionable hat jauntily askew, with a smile that showed a gleam of white teeth and red lips, stood Stepan Arkadyevitch, radiant, young, and beaming. He called him vigorously and urgently, and insisted on his stopping. He had one arm on the window of a carriage that was stopping at the corner, and out of the window were thrust the heads of a lady in a velvet hat and 2 children. Stepan Arkadyevitch was smiling and beckoning to his brother-in-law. The lady smiled a kindly smile, too, and she, too, waved her hand to Alexey Alexandrovitch. It was Dolly, with her children. Alexey Alexandrovitch did not want to see anyone in Moscow, and least of all his wife's brother. He raised his hat and would have driven on, but Stepan Arkadyevitch told his coachman to stop, and ran across the snow to him. "Well, what a shame not to have let us know. Been here long? I was at Dusat's yesterday and saw Karenina on the visitors' list, but it never entered my head that it was you," said Stepan Arkadyevitch, sticking his head in at the window of the carriage. Or I should have looked you up. I'm glad to see you," he said, knocking one foot against the other to shake the snow off. "What a shame of you not to let us know," he repeated. "I had no time. I am very busy," Alexey Alexandrovitch responded dryly. "Come to my wife. She does so want to see you." Alexey Alexandrovitch unfolded the rug in which his frozen feet were wrapped, and getting out of his carriage, made his way over the snow to Darya Alexandrovna. "Why, Alexey Alexandrovitch, what are you cutting us like this for?" said Dolly, smiling. "I was very busy. Delighted to see you," he said in a tone clearly indicating that he was annoyed by it. "How are you? Tell me, how is darling Anna?" Alexey Alexandrovitch mumbled something and would have gone on, but Stepan Arkadyevitch stopped him. "I tell you what we'll do tomorrow, Dolly. Ask him to dinner. We'll ask Koznishev and Pestasov, so as to entertain him with our Moscow celebrities." "Yes, please do come," said Dolly. "We will expect you at 5, or 6 o'clock, if you like. How is my darling Anna? How long—" "She is quite well," Alexey Alexandrovitch mumbled, frowning. "Delighted," and he moved away towards his carriage. "You will come?" Dolly called after him. Alexey Alexandrovitch said something which Dolly could not catch in the noise of the moving carriages. I shall come round tomorrow," Stepan Arkadyevitch shouted to him. Alexey Alexandrovitch got into his carriage and buried himself in it, so as neither to see nor be seen. "Odd fish," said Stepan Arkadyevitch to his wife, and glancing at his watch, he made a motion of his hand before his face, indicating a caress to his wife and children, and walking jauntily along the pavement. "Stiva! Stiva!" Dolly called, reddening. He turned round. "I must get coats, you know, for Grisha and Tanya. Give me the money." "Never mind. You will tell them I'll pay the bill." And he vanished, nodding genially to an acquaintance who drove by. End of chapter 6. So when I leave the house, which granted is not that often, but I never see anybody that I know, and every single character who leaves the house sees people that they know. Also, I think it's interesting, Stepan Arkadyevich's character. He was the very first character that we met in this whole book. And I was like, all right, we are going to spend a lot of time with this dude. No! Ooh, we spent like a couple chapters with him at the beginning, and then now he's just like a cameo in everybody else's life, which I love. I kind of do like that, to be like, hey, don't forget about this. Your first bestie main character, remember? Remember? And he was unfaithful. Right. Right. We're getting another look at the unfaithful, distrustful marriage, which is so wild. Yes. You're totally right. It is a contrast to the meeting with the lawyer, which Tolstoy loves to do. He loves to do an immediate chapter that's like, ba ba ba, and I love that. I love it so much. So, in contrast to that, we have um Alexei Alexandrovich. I like forgot his name for like 2 seconds. You all witnessed it. We have Alexei Alexandrovich walking about, stopping in Moscow as he's like going to go to the actual land and get you know, a feel for it in his business. Like we got all the businessy bits out of the way. And so he is on his way there traveling, I guess it's summer now, and he is walking about and he sees Stepan Arkadyevich and his wife Dolly, or Daria Arkadyevna. No, that's not her last name. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And oh no, it is her last name. Arkadyevna. And so they are in an unfaithful relationship. She has 6 kids, which is just more than Anna's about to be too. And they are appearing to make it work. Though about his infidelity, I'm not sure if that is as widely known as Anna's is, at least in like society circles. I don't really know. I don't remember. But it's like, okay, we just went to the lawyer for a divorce, or the options of a divorce, what that would mean on paper, actually in practice, in the process of it. And then we leave there and we see a couple who are staying together and appearing to be okay. Interesting. Chapter 7. The next day was Sunday. Stepan Arkadyevich went to the Grand Theater to a rehearsal of the ballet and gave Masha Chibishkova, a pretty dancing girl whom he had just taken under his protection, the coral necklace he had promised her the evening before, and behind the scenes in the dim daylight of the theater managed to kiss her pretty little face, radiant over her present. Besides the gift of the necklace, he wanted to arrange with her about meeting after the ballet. After explaining that he could not come at the beginning of the ballet, he promised he would come for the last act and take her to supper. From the theater, Stepan Arkadyevich drove to Ochotny Row, selected himself the fish and asparagus for dinner, and by 12 o'clock was at the Dussots', where he had to see 3 people, luckily all staying at the same hotel. Levin, who had recently come back from abroad and was staying there, the new head of his department, who had just been promoted to that position and had come on a tour of revision to Moscow, and his brother-in-law, Karenin, whom he must see so as to be sure of bringing him to dinner. Stepan Arkadyevich liked dining, but still better he liked to give a dinner, small, but very choice, both as regards the food and drink and as regards the selection of guests. He particularly liked the program of that day's dinner. There would be fresh perch, asparagus, and la pièce de résistance, first rate, but quite plain, roast beef and wines to suit. So much for the eating and drinking. Kitty and Levin would be of the party, and that this might not be obtrusively evident, there would be a girl cousin, too, and young Shtcherbatskoy, and la pièce de résistance among the guests, Sergei Kozanev and Alexei Alexandrovitch. Sergei Ivanovitch was a Moscow man and a philosopher. Alexei Alexandrovitch, a Petersburger, and a practical politician. He was asking, too, the well-known eccentric enthusiast Pestsov, a liberal, a great talker, a musician, a historian, and the most delightfully youthful person of 50, who would be a sauce or garnish for Koznishev and Karenin. He would provoke them and set them off. The second installment for the forest had been received from the merchant and was not yet exhausted. Dolly had been very amiable and good-humored of late, and the idea of the dinner pleased Stepan Arkadyevitch from every point of view. He was in the most light-hearted mood. There were two circumstances, a little unpleasant, but these two circumstances were drowned in the sea of good-humored gaiety which flooded the soul of Stepan Arkadyevitch. These two circumstances were, first, that on meeting Alexei Alexandrovitch the day before in the street he had noticed that he was cold and reserved with them, and putting the expression of Alexei Alexandrovitch's face and the fact that he had not come to see them or let them know of his arrival with the rumors he had heard about Anna and Vronsky, Stepan Arkadyevitch guessed that something was wrong between the husband and wife. That was one disagreeable thing. The other slightly disagreeable fact was that the new head of the department, like all new heads, had the reputation already of a terrible person, who got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, worked like a horse, and insisted on his subordinates working in the same way. Moreover, this new head had the further reputation of being a bear in his manners, and was, according to all reports, a man of a class in all respects the opposite of that to which his predecessor had belonged, and to which Stepan Arkadyevitch had hitherto belonged himself. On the previous day Stepan Arkadyevitch had appeared at the office in a uniform, and the new chief had been very affable, and had talked to him as to an acquaintance. Consequently, Stepan Arkadyevitch deemed it his duty to call upon him in his non-official dress. The thought that the new chief might not tender him a warm reception was the other unpleasant thing. But Stepan Arkadyevitch instinctively felt that everything would come round all right. They're all people, all men, like us poor sinners. Why be nasty and quarrelsome? He thought, as he went into the hotel. Good day, Vasily, he said, walking into the corridor with his hat cocked on one side and addressing a footman he knew. Why, you've let your whiskers grow. Levin number 7, eh? Take me up, please, and find out whether Count Anichkin, this was the new head, is receiving. Yes, sir, Vasily responded, smiling. We've not been to see us for a long while. I was here yesterday, but at the other entrance. Is this number 7? Levin was standing with a peasant from Tver in the middle of the room, measuring a fresh bear skin, when Stepan Arkadyevitch went in. What? You killed him? Cried Stepan Arkadyevitch. Well done! A she-bear? How are you, Arhip? He shook hands with the peasant, and sat down on the edge of the chair, without taking off his coat and hat. Come, take off your coat and stay a little, said Levin, taking his hat. No, I haven't time. I only looked in for a second, answered Stepan Arkadyevitch. He threw open his coat, but afterwards did take it off and sat on a whole hour, talking to Levin about hunting and the most intimate subjects. Come, tell me, please, what did you do abroad? Where have you been? Said Stepan Arkadyevitch, when the peasant had gone. Oh, I stayed in Germany, in Prussia, in France, and in England, not in the capitals, but in the manufacturing towns, and saw a great deal that was new to me, and I'm glad I went. Yes, I knew your idea of the solution. I knew your idea of the solution of the labor question. Not a bit. In Russia, there can be no labor question. In Russia, the question is that of the relation of the working people to the land. Though the question exists there too, but there it's a matter of repairing what's been ruined, while with us. Stepan Arkadyevitch listened attentively to Levin. Yes, yes, he said, it's very possible you're right, but I'm glad you're in good spirits, and are hunting bears, and working, and interested. Sherbatskoy told me another story. He met you, that you were in such a depressed state, talking of nothing but death. Well, what of it? I've not given up thinking of death, said Levin. It's true that it's high time I was dead, and that all this is nonsense. It's the truth I'm telling you. I do value my idea and my work awfully. But in reality, only consider this. All this world of ours is nothing but a speck of mildew, which has grown up on a tiny planet. And for us to suppose we can have something great, ideas, work, it's all dust and ashes. But all that's as old as the hills, my boy. It is old, but do you know, when you grasp this fully, then somehow everything becomes of no consequence. When you understand that you will die tomorrow, if not today, and nothing will be left, then everything is so unimportant. And I consider my idea very important, but it turns out really to be as unimportant too, even if it were carried out as doing for that bear. So, one goes on living, amusing oneself with hunting, with work, anything so as not to think of death. Stepan Arkadyevitch smiled a subtle, affectionate smile as he listened to Levin. Well, of course. Here you've come round to my point. Do you remember you attacked me for seeking enjoyment in life? Don't be so severe, moralist. No. All the same, what's fine in life is... Levin hesitated. Oh, I don't know. All I know is that we shall soon be dead. Why so soon? And, do you know, there's less charm in life when one thinks of death, but there's more peace. On the contrary, the finish is always the best. I must be going, said Stepan Arkadyevitch, getting up for the 10th time. Oh, no, stay a bit, said Levin, keeping him. Now, when shall we see each other again? I'm going tomorrow. I'm a nice person. Why, that's what I came for. You simply must come to dinner with us today. Your brother's coming, and Karenin, my brother-in-law. You don't mean to say he's here, said Levin, and he wanted to inquire about Kitty. He had heard at the beginning of the winter that she was at Petersburg with her sister, the wife of the diplomat, and he did not know whether she had come back or not. But he changed his mind and did not ask. Whether she's coming or not, I don't care, he said to himself. So you'll come? Of course. At 5 o'clock then, and not evening dress. And Stepan Arkadyevitch got up and went down below to the new head of his department. Instinct had not misled Stepan Arkadyevitch. The terrible new head turned out to be an extremely amenable person, and Stepan Arkadyevitch lunched with him and stayed on, so that it was 4 o'clock before he got to Alexey Alexandrovitch. End of chapter 7. Okay, chapter 7. Stepan Arkadyevitch is going to this hotel, and there are 3 people that he must see, and he is going to invite them all to dinner. And he has this all like elaborate plan. He knows exactly what they're going to have. He knows exactly what wines are going to be served. And that reminded me of the first dinner that we had with Stepan Arkadyevitch. Stepan Arkadyevitch had dinner with Levin, and Levin is he's just a country boy and doesn't know how to order anything. So Stepan Arkadyevitch is the one who took over and like ordered courses and courses and courses, and just so many oysters. Like that, I remember. It was like 30 oysters or something insane. And there was only 2 of them. And that was like the first course. There were so many things to follow. Anyway, I'm getting too worked up about these oysters. So Stepan is at the hotel. He's going up. His first stop is Levin. And he goes in there, and Levin, they're chatting, they're talking, he's asking questions about his travels, and if he has a solution for his labor question, and all of these things. And then we get to the subject of, yeah, like last time I just heard that you were just thinking about death all the time. And Levin is like, yeah, I still do. And so we have like a conversation about death and how thinking about death or knowing that death is inevitable is how it changes how you live your life, which is great. And they have very different ideas of death, and meaning they have very different ideas of peace and life. And I just think that's really cool. I think what Tolstoy did is a cool thing. And he something that Tolstoy does is always gives us multiple perspectives instead of just having like an echo chamber of one idea or just one option of something. He like puts two characters together who not necessarily always have very opposite opinions, but have different ways of going about the same opinion or something like that. And I just think that's really nice. Good job, Tolstoy. Chapter 8. Alexei Alexandrovich, on coming back from church service, had spent the whole morning indoors. He had two pieces of business before him that morning. First, to receive and send on a deputation from the native tribes which was on its way to Petersburg and now at Moscow. Secondly, to write the promised letter to the lawyer. The deputation, though it had been summoned at Alexei Alexandrovich's instigation, was not without its discomforting and even dangerous aspect, and he was glad he had found it in Moscow. The members of this deputation had not the slightest conception of their duty and the part they were to play. They naively believed that it was their business to lay before the Commission their needs and the actual condition of things, and to ask assistance of the government, and utterly failed to grasp that some of their statements and requests supported the contention of the enemy's side, and so spoiled the whole business. Alexei Alexandrovich was busily engaged with them for a long while, drew up a program for them from which they were not to depart, and on dismissing them wrote a letter to Petersburg for the guidance of the deputation. He had his chief support in this affair in the Countess Lydia Ivanovna. She was a specialist in the matter of deputations, and no one knew better than she how to manage them and put them in the way they should go. Having completed this task, Alexei Alexandrovich wrote the letter to the lawyer. Without the slightest hesitation, he gave him permission to act as he might judge best. In the letter he enclosed 3 of Vronsky's notes to Anna, which were in the portfolio he had taken away. Since Alexei Alexandrovich had left home with the intention of not returning to his family again, and since he had been at the lawyer's and had spoken, though only to one man, of his intention, since especially he had translated the matter from the world of real life to the world of ink and paper, he had grown more and more used to his own intention, and by now distinctly perceived the feasibility of its execution. He was sealing the envelope to the lawyer when he heard the loud tones of Stepan Arkadyevitch's voice. Stepan Arkadyevitch was disputing with Alexei Alexandrovich's servant, and insisting on being announced. No matter, thought Alexei Alexandrovich, so much the better. I will inform him at once of my position in regard to his sister, and explain why it is I can't dine with him. Come in, he said aloud, collecting his papers and putting them in the blotting paper. There, you see? You're talking nonsense, and he's at home, responded Stepan Arkadyevitch's voice, addressing the servant who had refused to let him in, and taking off his coat as he went. Oblonsky walked into the room. Well, I am awfully glad I've found you. So I hope, Stepan Arkadyevitch began cheerfully. I cannot come, Alexei Alexandrovich said coldly, standing and not asking his visitor to sit down. Alexei Alexandrovich had thought to pass at once into those frigid relations in which he ought to stand with the brother of a wife against whom he was beginning a suit for divorce. But he had not taken into into account the ocean of kindliness brimming over in the heart of Stepan Arkadyevitch. Stepan Arkadyevitch opened wide his clear, shining eyes. "Why can't you? What do you mean?" he asked in perplexity, speaking in French. "Oh, but it's a promise, and we're all counting on you." "I want to tell you that I can't dine at your house because the terms of relationship which have existed between us must cease." "How? How do you mean?" "What for?" said Stepan Arkadyevitch with a smile. "Because I am beginning an action for divorce against your sister, my wife. I ought to have—" But before Alexey Alexandrovitch had time to finish his sentence, Stepan Arkadyevitch was behaving not at all as he had expected. He groaned and sank into an armchair. "No, Alexey Alexandrovitch, what are you saying?" cried Oblonsky, and his suffering was apparent on his face. "It is so. Excuse me, I can't. I can't believe it." Alexey Alexandrovitch sat down, feeling that his words had not had the effect he anticipated, and that it would be unavoidable for him to explain his position, and that, whatever explanations he might make, his relations with his brother-in-law would remain unchanged. "Yes, I am brought to the painful necessity of seeking a divorce," he said. "I will say one thing, Alexey Alexandrovitch. I know you for an excellent, upright man. I know Anna, excuse me, I can't change my opinion of her, for a good, an excellent woman, and so, excuse me, I cannot believe it. There is some misunderstanding," said he. "Oh, if it were merely a misunderstanding—" "Pardon, I understand," interposed Stepan Arkadyevitch. "But of course, one thing, you must not act in haste. You must not act in haste." "I am not acting in haste," Alexey Alexandrovitch said coldly. "But one cannot ask advice of anyone in such a matter. I have quite made up my mind." "This is awful," said Stepan Arkadyevitch. "I would do one thing, Alexey Alexandrovitch. I beseech you, do it," he said. "No action has yet been taken, if I understand rightly. Before you take advice, see my wife. Talk to her. She loves Anna like a sister. She loves you. And she's a wonderful woman. For God's sake, talk to her. Do me that favor. I beseech you." Alexey Alexandrovitch pondered, and Stepan Arkadyevitch looked at him sympathetically, without interrupting his silence. "You will go to see her?" "I don't know. That was just why I have not been to see you. I imagine our relations must change." "Why so?" "I don't see that. Allow me to believe that apart from our connection you have for me, at least in part, the same friendly feeling I have always had for you, and sincere esteem," said Stepan Arkadyevitch, pressing his hand. "Even if your worst suppositions were correct, I don't, and never would, take on myself to judge either side, and I see no reason why our relations should be affected. But now, do this. Come and see my wife." "Well, we look at the matter differently," said Stepan Arkadyevitch. "No," said Alexey Alexandrovitch coldly. "However, we won't discuss it. No, why shouldn't you come today to dine anyway? My wife's expecting you. Please, do come. And above all, talk it over with her. She's a wonderful woman. For God's sake, on my knees, I implore you." "If you so much wish it, I will come," said Alexey Alexandrovitch, sighing. And, anxious to change the conversation, he inquired about what interested them both, the new head of Stepan Arkadyevitch's department, a man, not yet old, who had suddenly been promoted to so high a position. Alexey Alexandrovitch had previously felt no liking for Count Anichkin, and had always differed from him in his opinions. But now, from a feeling readily comprehensible to officials, that hatred felt by one who has suffered a defeat in the service for one who has received a promotion, he could not endure him. "Well, have you seen him?" said Alexey Alexandrovitch with a malignant smile. Of course. He was at our sitting yesterday. He seems to know his work capitally, and to be very energetic. Yes, but what is his energy directed to? Said Alexey Alexandrovitch. Is he aiming to do anything, or simply undoing what's been done? It's the great misfortune of our government. This paper administration, of which he's a worthy representative. Really, I don't know what fault one could find with him. His policy I don't know, but one thing. He's a very nice fellow, answered Stepan Arkadyevitch. I've been seeing him, and he's really a capital fellow. We lunched together, and I taught him how to make, you know that drink, wine and oranges. It's so cooling, and it's a wonder he didn't know it. He liked it awfully. No, really, he's a capital fellow. Stepan Arkadyevitch glanced at his watch. Why, good heavens, it's 4 already, and I've got to go to Dolgovnishin's. So please, come round to dinner. You can't imagine how you will grieve my wife with me. The way in which Alexey Alexandrovitch saw his brother-in-law out was very different from the manner in which he had met him. I've promised, and I'll come, he answered wearily. Believe me, I appreciate it, and I hope you won't regret it, answered Stepan Arkadyevitch, smiling. And, putting on his coat as he went, he patted the footman on the head, chuckled, and went out. At 5 o'clock, and not evening dress, please, he shouted once more, turning at the door. End of chapter 8. Oh boy. Okay, so the last chapter, Stepan Arkadyevitch is making his way to visit the different people. We saw his visit with Levin. He also visits the new head of the department, and he actually kind of enjoys him. The rumors that have been floating around about him being terrible didn't seem to fit with the person that he met, and they went to lunch together, and everything seemed fine. And he enjoyed himself so much that he didn't even realize that he was making his way to Alexey Alexandrovitch at 4 o'clock, and he's telling people to meet for dinner at 5, and it's just like, bud, you gotta wrap it up a little bit. So this chapter was dealing with the conversation between Alexey and Stepan, and Stepan is outside arguing with the servant, and Alexey is like, all right, well, may as well get it over with. Let's go. And so he calls him in. Stepan comes in, and immediately Alexey is like, I cannot go to dinner with you. And Stepan is like, what are you talking about? You promised. Come on, my wife will be there. It'll be a treat. Like, you have to come and see her. And Alexey is like, no, I'm not going to be there. Things have changed, and our relationship will thus be changing. And Stepan already kind of had an idea that something was going on, that the marriage between Alexei and Anna was not all roses and sunshine. And so he kind of has an idea of what's going on. And so he's trying to convince Alexei to not only come to dinner, but also to discuss with his wife, with Daria, because they kind of had the same situation. And so he wants Daria to talk with Alexei to be like, yeah, like, we're the same. The same thing happened to us. This is how I'm dealing with it. Oh, this is how you're dealing with it. Like that sort of thing. And it seems almost like not only does Stepan Arkadyevitch want Alexey Alexandrovitch to talk to Daria, but he wants to, it seemingly, to convince Alexei not to get a divorce. That's what the underlying seems to be, or at least not to make hasty decisions and to not just immediately rush to things. And Alexei is like, well, I don't know what you're talking about, or like, it's not a rush decision. I have proof. Like, this has been a long time coming, and I'm gonna do this. And eventually, Stepan does wear down Alexei. And so Alexei agrees to go to dinner and agrees to talk to Daria. And that's where the chapter ended. Was Stepan leaving to go get ready for dinner. Not in evening wear. At 5 o'clock. Let's see where we're at. Mm, we'll do one more. We'll do one more. It'll take us a little past time, but feeling spicy. And I'm really enjoying what's going on right now. Okay. Chapter 9. It was past 5, and several guests had already arrived before the host himself got home. He went in together with Sergei Ivanovich Koznishev and Pestsov, who had reached the street door at the same time. These were the two leading representatives of the Moscow intellectuals, as Oblonsky had called them. Both were men respected for their character and their intelligence. They respected each other, but were in complete and hopeless disagreement upon almost every subject, not because they belonged to opposite parties, but precisely because they were of the same party. Their enemies refused to see any distinction between their views, but in that party each had his own special shade of opinion. And since no difference is less easily overcome than the difference of opinion about semi-abstract questions, they never agreed in any opinion, and had long, indeed, been accustomed to jeer without anger, each at the other's incorrigible aberrations. They were just going in at the door, talking of the weather, when Stepan Arkadyevitch overtook them. In the drawing-room there were already sitting Prince Alexander Dmitrievich Shtcherbatskoy, young Shtcherbatskoy, Turovstin, Kitty, and Karenin. Stepan Arkadyevitch saw immediately that things were not going well in the drawing-room without him. Darya Alexandrovna, in her best gray silk gown, obviously worried about the children who were to have their dinner by themselves in the nursery, and by her husband's absence, was not equal to the task of making the party mix without him. All were sitting like so many priests' wives on a visit, so the old prince expressed it, obviously wondering why they were there, and pumping up remarks simply to avoid being silent. Turovstin, good, simple man, felt unmistakably a fish out of water, and the smile with which his thick lips greeted Stepan Arkadyevitch said, as plainly as words, "Well, old boy, you have popped me down in a learned seat. A drinking party now, or the Chateau de Fleurs, would be more in my line." The old prince sat in silence, his bright little eyes watching Karenin from one side, and Stepan Arkadyevitch saw that he had already formed a phrase to sum up that politician of whom guests were invited to partake, as though he were a sturgeon. Kitty was looking at the door, calling up all her energies to keep her from blushing at the entrance of Konstantin Levin. Young Shtcherbatskoy, who had not been introduced to Karenin, was trying to look as though he were not in the least conscious of it. Karenin himself had followed the Petersburg fashion for a dinner with ladies, and was wearing evening dress and a white tie. Stepan Arkadyevitch saw by his face that he had come simply to keep his promise, and was performing a disagreeable duty in being present at this gathering. He was indeed the person chiefly responsible for the chill benumbing all the guests before Stepan Arkadyevitch came in. On entering the drawing-room, Stepan Arkadyevitch apologized, explaining that he had been detained by that prince, who was always the scapegoat for all his absences and unpunctualities, and in one moment he had made all the guests acquainted with each other, and, bringing together Alexey Alexandrovich and Sergei Koznishev, started them on a discussion of the Russification of Poland, into which they immediately plunged with Pestsov. Slapping Turovskin on the shoulder, he whispered something comic in his ear, and set him down by his wife and the old prince. Then he told Kitty she was looking very pretty that evening, and presented Shtcherbatskoy to Karenin. In a moment he had so kneaded together the social dough that the drawing room became very lively, and there was a merry buzz of voices. Konstantin Levin was the only person who had not arrived. But this was so much the better, as going into the drawing room, Stepan Arkadyevitch found to his honor that the port and sherry had been procured from Desprez, and not from Levy, and directing that the coachman should be sent off as speedily as possible to Levy's. He was going back to the drawing room. In the dining room he was met by Konstantin Levin. "I'm not late?" "You can never help being late," said Stepan Arkadyevitch, taking his arm. "Have you a lot of people? Who's here?" asked Levin, unable to help blushing as he knocked the snow off his cap with his glove. "All our own set. Kitty's here. Come along, I'll introduce you to Karenin." Stepan Arkadyevitch, for his liberal views, was well aware that to meet Karenin was sure to be felt a flattering distinction, and so treated his best friends to his honor. But at that instant Konstantin Levin was not in a condition to feel all the gratification of making such an acquaintance. He had not seen Kitty since that memorable evening when he met Vronsky, not counting, that is, the moment when he had had a glimpse of her on the high road. He had known at the bottom of his heart that he would see her here today. But to keep his thoughts free he had tried to persuade himself that he did not know it. Now when he heard that she was here, she was suddenly conscious of such a delight, and at the same time of such dread, that his breath failed him and he could not utter what he wanted to say. "What is she like? What is she like? Like what she used to be, or like what she was in the carriage? What if Darya Alexandrovna told the truth? Why shouldn't it be the truth?" he thought. "Oh, please, introduce me to Karenin," he brought out with an effort, and with a desperately determined step, he walked into the drawing room and beheld her. She was not the same as she used to be, nor was she as she had been in the carriage. She seemed quite different. She was scared, shy, shamefaced, and still more charming from it. She saw him the very instant he walked into the room. She had been expecting him. She was delighted, and so confused at her own delight that there was a moment, the moment when he went up to her sister and glanced again at her, when she and he and Dolly, who saw it all, thought she would break down and begin cry. She crimsoned, turned white, crimsoned again and grew faint, waiting with quivering lips for him to come to her. He went up to her, bowed, and held out his hand without speaking. Except for the slight quiver of her lips and the moisture in her eyes that made them brighter, her smile was almost calm as she said, "How long it is since we've seen each other?" And with desperate determination she pressed his hand with her cold hand. "You've not seen me, but I've seen you," said Levin with a radiant smile of happiness. "I saw you when you were driving from the railway station to Ergushovo." "When?" she asked, wondering. "You were driving to Ergushovo," said Levin, feeling as if he would sob with the rapture that was flooding in his heart. "And how dared I associate a thought of anything not innocent with this touching creature? And yes, I do believe it's true that Darya Alexandrovna told her," he thought. Stepan Arkadyevitch took him by the arm and led him away to Karenin. "Let me introduce you," he mentioned their names. "Very glad to meet you again," said Alexey Alexandrovitch coldly, shaking hands with Levin. "You are acquainted?" Stepan Arkadyevitch asked in surprise. "We spent 3 hours together in the train," said Levin, smiling, "but got out just as in a masquerade, quite mystified. At least I was." "Nonsense. Come along, please," said Stepan Arkadyevitch, pointing in the direction of the dining room. The men went into the dining room and went up to a table laid with 6 sorts of spirits and as many kinds of cheese, some with little silver spades and some without, caviar, herrings, preserves of various kinds, and plates with slices of French bread. The men stood round the strong-smelling spirits and salt delicacies, and the discussion of the Russification of Poland between Koznishev, Karenin, and Pestsov died down in anticipation of dinner. Sergei Ivanovich was unequaled in his skill in winding up the most heated and serious argument by some unexpected pinch of Attic assault that changed the disposition of his opponent. He did this now. Alexei Alexandrovich had been maintaining that the Russification of Poland could only be accomplished as a result of larger measures which ought to be introduced by the Russian government. Pestsov insisted that one country can only absorb another when it is the more densely populated. Koznishev admitted both points, but with limitations. As they were going out of the drawing room to conclude the argument, Koznishev said, smiling, "So, then, for the Russification of our foreign populations there is but one method, to bring up as many children as one can. My brother and I are terribly in fault, I see. You married men, especially you, Stepan Arkadyevitch, are the real patriots. What number have you reached?" he said, smiling genially at their host and holding out a tiny wineglass to him. Everyone laughed, and Stepan Arkadyevitch with particular good humor. "Oh, yes, that's the best method," he said, munching cheese and filling the wineglass with a special sort of spirit. The conversation dropped at the jest. "The cheese is not bad. Shall I give you some?" said the master of the house. "Why have you been going... What? Why have you been going in for gymnastics again?" he asked Levin, pinching his muscles with his left hand. Levin smiled, bent his arm, and under Stepan Arkadyevitch's fingers the muscles swelled up like a sound cheese, hard as a knob of iron, through the fine cloth of the coat. "What biceps! A perfect Samson." "I imagine great strength is needed for hunting bears," observed Alexei Alexandrovich, who had the mistiest notions about the cheese. He cut off and spread with cheese a wafer of bread fine as a spider web. Levin smiled. "Not at all. Quite the contrary. A child could kill a bear," he said with a slight bow, moving aside for the ladies who were approaching the table. "You have killed a bear, I've been told," said Kitty, trying assiduously to catch with her fork a perverse mushroom that would slip away, and setting the lace quivering with her white arm. "Are there bears on your place?" she added, turning her charming little head to him and smiling. There was apparently nothing extraordinary in what she said, but what unutterable meaning there was for him in every sound, in every turn of her lips, her eyes, her hand, as she said it. There was entreaty for forgiveness, and trust in him, and tenderness, soft, timid tenderness, and promise and hope and love for him, which he could not but believe in, and which choked him with happiness. "No, we've been hunting in this fur province. I was coming back from there that I met your beau-frère in the train, or your beau-frère's brother-in-law," he said with a smile. "It was an amusing meeting." And he began telling with droll good humor how, after not sleeping all night, he had, wearing an old fur-lined, full-skirted coat, got into Alexei Alexandrovitch's compartment. The conductor, forgetting the proverb, would have chucked me out on account of my attire, but thereupon I began expressing my feelings in elevated language, and you too, he said, addressing Karenina and forgetting his name, at first would have ejected me on the ground of the old coat, but afterwards you took my part, for which I am extremely grateful. The rights of passengers, generally, to choose their seats are too ill-defined, said Alexei Alexandrovich, rubbing the tips of his fingers on his handkerchief. I saw you were in uncertainty about me, said Levin, smiling good-naturedly. But I made haste to plunge into intellectual conversation to smooth over the defects of my attire. Sergei Ivanovich, while he kept up a conversation with their hosts, had one ear for his brother, and he glanced askance at him. What is the matter with him today? Why such a conquering hero? He thought. He did not know that Levin was feeling as though he had grown wings. Levin knew she was listening to his words, and that she was glad to listen to them. And this was not the only thing that interested him. not in that room only, but in the whole world. There existed for him only himself, with enormously increased importance and dignity in his own eyes, and she. He felt himself on a pinnacle that made him giddy, and far away down below were all those nice, excellent Karenins, Oblonskys, and all the world. Quite without attracting notice, without glancing at them, as though there was no other place left, Stepan Arkadyevitch put Levin and Kitty side by side. "Oh, you may as well sit there," he said to Levin. The dinner was as choice as the china in which Stepan Arkadyevitch was a connoisseur. The soup Marie Louise was a splendid success. The tiny pies eaten with it melted in the mouth and were irreproachable. The two footmen and Matvey in white cravats did their duty with the dishes and wines unobtrusively, quietly, and swiftly. On the material side, the dinner was a success. It was no less so on the immaterial. The conversation, at times general and at times between individuals, never paused, and towards the end the company was so lively that the men rose from the table without stopping speaking, and even Alexey Alexandrovitch thawed. End of chapter 9. All right, chapter 9. We have the dinner, and because Stepan Arkadyevitch spent so much time talking to the three people that he wanted to talk to at the hotel, he arrived late, and there's already guests there at his own home, and it seems like the party is not going great. Not as well as he wants it to. His wife is preoccupied with making sure that all six of their children are fed, and trying to make conversation and trying to, like, there's too many things for her to do alone, and she is just not in the like hostess mode. So Stepan Arkadyevitch comes in and he's able to like introduce people to each other and mingle around and schmooze and like get conversation going and everything like that. And Kitty and Levin have their first conversation since he proposed and she said no. And it wasn't as uncomfortable as I thought it would be. Probably because it's in like a public setting, but I feel like it will be uncomfortable later, is what I'm guessing. Like, I feel like Levin is the type of person that needs answers, and so I think he's going to, like, demand answers from Kitty eventually. Um, so that happened. Kitty, or not Kitty, Levin and Alexei were introduced, and they'd already met each other on the train, and they're just having discussions. We get, political discussions, philosophical discussions, all of those types of things, all around a dinner party, and they do all sit down for dinner. The dinner itself is unmatched. The food is delightful. The conversation never ceases, whether it's for everybody or if it's like individual conversations. Not There's no lull in the activities, which is a great social setting if you're hosting a party or hosting a dinner. And even at the end, Alexei is no longer as like frigid as when he like came, because it was very apparent that he was here because he made a promise and he didn't really want to be here like at all. I'm guessing we're gonna get the conversation between Daria and Alexei soon. Maybe? We'll see. Oh, and also sitting down together were Kitty and Levin. Coincidence? Probably not. But that's going to be it for today. Thank you all for being here. So, yes, thank you all so much for being here. It is a pleasure, as always, whether you lurk, whether you chat. I 1000% appreciate you. And I 1000% appreciate your support. If I don't see you next time, I hope to see you very soon.